Let's book this class once again. Class is booked, great, but if you come back to the list of classes, you'll still see this class appearing. The member shouldn't be able to see this once it's booked, right? So we need to edit the query to remove booked classes from this list. In other words, for each scheduled class, we want to check the list of booked members and remove that row if auth user ID is found. Meaning we have to remove that scheduled class if the relationship exists. Eloquent allows us to query the relations using various methods like has, where doesn't have, and so on. You can go to the documentation, search for querying relationship existence, right here, and then you can also look for querying relationship absence. In our case right now, we need to query relationship absence because we need those classes which are not booked by the authenticated user. That means where the relation does not exist. So back to the code. So chain this query with where doesn't have, pass the relationship members, and we cannot leave it just here. We have to add another constraint because if we don't, then all the scheduled classes with at least one member will be excluded. Where does it have members, right? But we only want to exclude those where the user ID is our authenticated user. So further add a query where user ID is equal to auth user ID because these are the ones we want to exclude. Alright, now let's check, refresh, and that class is gone. It doesn't appear anymore. Now go back to the code and notice a couple of things. First, this query has become quite complex and unreadable. Also, we have repeated this where clause of date time greater than now multiple times already. That's definitely not a good practice. What if we want to repeat this also elsewhere? And repeated code is not good. Thankfully, we can use query scopes to avoid this. Since we are frequently using this where clause to fetch upcoming classes, let's first create a scope for that. Open scheduled class model, and here say public function scope, and let's call it upcoming, and accept the builder query here, and return within this method, define the constraint and return the query builder instance. So return query, you can use the constraint here where date time greater than now. Okay, and now we can use this scope in our query. Simply replace this with upcoming. Note that we don't prefix this with scope here, but query scopes have to be prefixed with scope in the definition. And now we can replace all the where clauses like this one here with upcoming, much more readable. And remember, we've used this in our scheduled class controller as well. So let me go to scheduled class controller, search for where, yeah, right here, and replace this with upcoming. And that's it. Now let's check if everything is still working the same. Refresh. It's not. Okay, we forgot to import builder here. Where is that? Yeah, right here. Import this class, Eloquent builder. And now let's try. Refresh. Yeah, everything is working fine. You can even log in as an instructor and check if you're able to view only the upcoming classes. Now similarly, for this complex query that we just wrote, let's create a scope for this as well. So let me just cut it out from here. Go to scheduled class and define a scope, public function scope not booked, because that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get all the classes that are not booked by that user. Similarly, builder query and add that constraint here, return query, and I'll paste whatever I copied. And here I can now say not booked. Okay, notice how much more readable this gets, and we can reuse this wherever we want without repeating it. Let's recheck, refresh, and we're not able to see the class. So we just saw how to define and utilize local scopes. I encourage you to take a look at the documentation and learn about global scopes as well. I hope now you can recognize whenever you're repeating where clauses and avoid that repetition by using query scopes.